Hey, what's up, everyone? I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to this early episode of The Good Guy Drinks Whiskey, episode number 10. And today I am super excited to have the one, the only, the GOAT, Roy from Aqvavitae, joining me here today, where we'll ask him 16 questions to get to know him a little better as we share 3 whiskeys. So with that, I will invite him on right now. Hey, Roy, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well, Tim. I'm doing well. So it's nice to be here, and we've got whiskey.
Yes.
What were the 3 whiskey? Is it a spoiler to go through?
No, not a spoiler at all. We'll start with that. The 3 that we're having. You can pick the order, but the 3 that we have are the Kilkerran 16-year-old.
Yes.
The Teaninich 11-year-old. From the malt of Scotland.
Okay. And next?
And then the Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength. Mine is batch B120.
And mine, you can tell I've been cut short tonight, yeah? I'm just rushing away to get these.
Yeah, no worries at all.
So we've got the same Kilkerran, the 2021 release of the Kilkerran 16. We've got the same B120. But I'm not surprised that we actually have a different Teaninich. If you can see, this is actually a 12-year-old single malts of Scotland.
Yep.
But that's kind of normal because, you know, these tend to be single casks from single malts of Scotland. So it's really difficult for them to spread a single cask globally, right? So you probably find that you've got a different cask release from me on these things anyway. But so we can either drink this together and just kind of compare notes, or we can try something else. But I think the Teanich's probably where I would start.
All right. Yeah, let's start with that. Yeah, no, that sounds good to me. I'm guessing they'll be similar enough. I'm assuming yours is also hogshead. Mine's a couple of months shy of 12 years old. I'm assuming they'll be fairly similar, although my palate's not quite as refined as yours. So I'm sure you'll be able to pick out things I will not.
Well, I'm not sure that that's true. Mine is at a refill, but I do have Teaninich hogsheads.
All right.
Have a look at it. Let's have a look at this. I've got a couple here, and we'll go on ABV on this one, okay? Because here, this is from the same company. This is a Teaninich that's from a hogshead.
Yep.
It's an 11-year-old. Oh, this is interesting. But this is small batch, so it's not single cask. So it just tells us that it's 5 casks here, and this is at 48% ABV.
All right.
But I've got
mine's
a
at
local.
6. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, another Teaninich from my local independent spirits company. Yep. This is a very good bottle. I can't remember if I bought 2 or 3 of these. I think 2. I think this is my second.
Yep.
They had this a couple of years ago. It's their own bottling, and this is 57.9 10-year-old.
All right.
What's yours, cask strength?
So mine is 60.4%.
Okay, so I think we should have these 2. These are going to be closest. Okay.
The closest ones we have, yes.
Superb, Tim. Superb.
Now, before we jump into this, or while we're jumping into this, and before I get into those laundry list of questions that I warned you about, I just want to talk a little bit about your latest project you're working on, DramFace, which launched about a month or 2 ago, right?
Yes.
And just from a user's perspective, it's one of the cooler review sites out there. Because you've got the context of your scoring, 1 through 10, what they all mean. You have a numerical number for somebody who's just in for a quick look, and then you've got some history and notes on the whiskey if you want a more in-depth analysis, with also referencing other reviewers out there. So it's completely collaborative and open to the whole whiskey world. How long have you kind of been in the works with this project, and what was the where did it begin? What was the origins of it?
So if you obviously, Tim, I know that you've been around the YouTube channel for a long time.
Yeah.
Thanks for your support, buddy. It's nice to have you
Absolutely.
around. And what I was able to work out with YouTube very quickly is that you can have this really quite fun collaborative environment to share whiskey in, where all the YouTube channels were very, very good at being mutually supportive and looking after each other, shouting each other out, hanging out on each other's channels, that helped build a really connected, invested community. And it turns out that the community wanted to support that and help it to endure. So they would support the channels through Patreon. And what that does is that gives you an option then to release yourself from the industry. You don't need to take free bottles. You don't need to look to them for sponsorships, partnerships, whatever it may be. And it made me realize that I was working so well. And, you know, there's not one size fits all. There's lots of different ways to do all of these things. But it was working so well that it was, do you not think, could that not work in the web space? In time, there's a site out there called Malt Review. And a few years ago, they were probably one of the first sites to start a Patreon support thing. And I thought, yes, finally, we've got this. We can take this into the web space, have an independent voice that can endure and sustain itself based on community funding. It just makes sense that you should be funded by the people who get the value out of you.
Absolutely.
And if you're funded by the producers, they'll get value out of you, of course. But your audience you're speaking to is the customer, the consumer. That means that there's an inherent, in a modern world, there's an inherent conflict there. And it might be that the reviewer is absolutely full of integrity, but if you can fund it from the community, that just takes it all off the table. It's not in question.
Absolutely.
So I'd kind of kicked around an idea for a long time, and if YouTube decides that Aqvavitae isn't a nice channel anymore and it decides to shut me down, I don't have a lot of recompense there, right? So there's a kind of desire to diverse a little bit and kind of just keep doing different things that I might enjoy. So I always had an idea that it might be nice to do that. But I knew that it would need a team. I knew that I couldn't do it on my own, and it needed the right timing. And that timing turned out to be last year. A few things happened at the start of the year, last year, where I thought I would have the time, but then the Oswas came along. So it was put to the side while we sorted through the online Scotch Whisky Awards. That was a collaborative thing I did between Ralphie and I. And then at the end of the year, when that was kind of done and dusted, I started to think about the thing again. And I reached out to a friend of mine who used to be the editor of Malt Review, but spent most of last year researching a closed distillery in Inverness called Glenvore. And I just said, you know, I've got this pitch I would like to share with you for some advice or whatever. And secretly, I always wanted to attract him on board. And I gave him the pitch, and he said, "Aye, I'm excited by this. I'm up for this. I'd like to help on this." So he's now the editor, and from there we managed to get a sub-editor. We managed to get a social media guy to look after content and tone and everything. We managed to get a web developer who was able to help me push the boundaries of the website and things, because I'm not a web developer. I can do only basic things. Suddenly we had this team. And in January, we kind of decided it would be nice to launch it on the 1st of April. But we were going so fast that we realized a lot of this stuff that we're writing is relevant now. It's maybe got a shelf life. We're way ahead of schedule. Let's launch quicker. So we launched on the 17th of February, which is 5 weeks ago. That was the 5th year anniversary of my channel. So it was a very self-indulgent date. And we launched, and that's where it came from. It's just... whiskey kind of obsesses me, and I spend so much time thinking about it, Tim. I think you're probably similar, aren't you, right? It's so I'm always kind of looking for new ways to share whiskey, to talk about whiskey, and I'm not going to stop the YouTube thing. That's still my priority very much, but it's nice to have that outlet there on the web as well, and to write. I didn't realize how much I would enjoy writing.
That's awesome, and it's good to not be complacent and always be pushing those boundaries, and also not being held captive by the YouTube algorithm, right? So you're actually branching out of that and kind of pushing that, and that's really cool. And you are a very eloquent writer, just based on your weekly newsletters that come out on Patreon. So, I mean, the more we get to see from you and everybody you're collaborating with, the better. I mean, this is a very cool start. And, for being a 5-week-old website, it looks like it's already been on the web for years, and based on its refinement and how good the quality is.
Well, what we need is Roy enjoys writing, shock. What we need is when we launched, we only had about, I say only, we had a decent amount of reading that we went live with. So we had about 30 articles or so. That was between features and individual bottle reviews on dramface.com. And that was enough to kind of get people through the weekend or whatever till we started to start loading up the daily content a few days later. But we haven't hit the ground with a back catalogue. So DramFace is going to be this kind of slow burn thing, I think, that is going to become more relevant and more valuable over time as we build up that back catalogue.
Oh, yeah.
So if you fancy doing a little bit of writing for us, Tim, you can make a submission to the editors and I'll put in a good word for you.
Well, writing's never been my strong suit. I'm very analytically based. So, if you ever need any help with some background algorithms and, statistics or math, just let me know. I'll be your guy for that. But what you guys have so far is just is excellent. I'm very excited to see how DramFace progresses and evolves over the next months and years to come.
Super. Yeah. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It means a lot.
All right, let's jump into the first whiskey here and the first few questions. So the Teaninich, 11-year-old. I think I actually bought this bottle based on one of your recommendations, where I think your general sentiment was Teaninich usually makes a good whiskey. It's hard to find a bad Teaninich, so I was like, all right, let's give it a shot. And it is a very nice, for my, about 2/3 into the bottle here. It's nothing flashy in my opinion, but it's just a very high quality, hogshead cask whiskey that, no frills, but just a very pleasant sipper. At least that's my impression of this one.
So the one I've got in front of me tonight, it's a 10-year-old, and what Teaninich famously changed from a traditional mash tun. I think it was the late 90s or just around about 2000, somewhere around that order, and they changed to a much more efficient system for their mash, where they used a mash filter and a hammer mill. So rather than using a traditional mill and a traditional mash tun, they switched to this much more efficient system. So the idea is that it should bring more of that, a purer experience on the spirit. Waterford, interestingly, do the same thing. So does Inchdairney on the east coast of Scotland. And I wanted to try and work out what difference that would have made in the liquid.
Yeah.
And through some friends on Instagram, actually, Whisky Barista and a few other guys, they managed to put together a flight of pre-mash filter and post-mash filter Teaninich. But what it did for me is it reinforced the thing I love about Teaninich. It's not on the mall all of the time, but it's a very fresh, almost like it can sometimes play a little bit like limoncello. Lemon sorbet, like a lovely, light, bright lemon fizz. So it's not just about the flavour, it's about the effervescence on the palate that can bring you that texture as well. Yeah. And there's a wee bit of it in this. It's very citrus to me. Citrus forward. Yeah. This is high ABV. Yours is high ABV as well, isn't it? 60%. Yeah. It's one of those distilleries that, like so many Diageo distilleries, Linkwood, Benrinnes, Glenlossie, lots and lots of others. Obviously, those the ones I've mentioned there are all Speyside, but think of Kalila. Yeah. And these are, except for Flora and Fauna, you rarely see releases from them. So it's wonderful to be able to have independent bottlings of it so that you can connect with these distilleries and understand them. And you're spot on. They're rare. These are made at such a scale and dialed into such a tight tolerance, I think, that it's difficult to find bad ones. They're very well made to a very consistent level. And it takes a lot of tomfoolery with casks, potentially, or a bad cask in order to break that. It tends to be fairly decent. Sometimes they can be a little bit simple to some people, but for me, the quality means that that's okay. It's okay to have a simple whiskey if it's good, I think. Not everything needs to be a multi-layered, complex stay in the glass all night type experience.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so with that, let's get started on the first of our questions. We'll go about 5 questions at a time for each whiskey. And again, these are meant to get to know you a little bit better for those who are watching. The first one, I think we might already know the answer to. What do you do for a living?
So my day job was marketing, and so it was a little bit of branding, a little bit of events, a little bit of product, web space, digital, all of that. And it was in business to business, electronics. So we did communications and power systems for military, transportation, various things. It was a good job. I worked with them for over 20 years. It was a great job. I really enjoyed it, and it was a good job to have. A couple of years ago, I went self-employed. Timing was poor. And then only less than a year into my employment, COVID kicks in, and nobody's doing events, nobody's doing product launches, nobody's even doing a sales meeting.
Yeah.
No, it just, everything I did was just removed. It was incredible. And as we got to the end of my contract negotiation, the head office was in Milan. And you might remember at the start of the outbreak in Europe, the ground zero for the outbreak in Europe was Milan. And renewing my contract was not a priority. So I still do bits and pieces for them when they need me, but that was my opportunity to say, I'm going to give this whiskey thing a go and make the jump. Yeah. So the VPub went from twice a month to twice a week when lockdown kicked in, and I threw everything at it. Started to reach out to guests and change the format, make it a crunchy topic every week, make it much more routine. So that's a long way, Tim, for me to answer, that I have found a way to make this my day job. Yeah. And I am as happy as I've ever been. I love it.
Yeah, and I feel like that's every whiskey content creator's dream, is to, have that as their day job and able to, to have their passion also be their earning and their income and their livelihood, basically. So that's awesome.
Absolutely. And I think that I was always nervous about doing that, because you're worried that if your boss becomes whiskey, then it's just going to be, a different. But it's not been like that, because the community is so cool. The opportunities that come along are so cool. The people involved, and I can direct my own things. So as soon as you find that there's negativity or a place that you're not enjoying, or you just switch and pivot, and you can. Yeah. You don't need to ask anyone for holidays and things. It's just, yes, I'm enjoying it. I'm not earning the money I used to earn, but honestly, how much of a pay cut would you take if you were guaranteed a much happier role?
All right. What was your first job?
My first job, oh, wow. My first job was in retail. My first job was in an aquarium. So a shop that sold fish tanks, aquariums, tropical fish, marine tropical, cold water fish, that kind of thing, back when I was 16 years old. It was in Glasgow. It was a shop in Glasgow. I think it's still there now. It's called Coral Reef Aquarium on Paisley Road West. And that was my first job, selling tropical fish.
Oh, that's cool. Do you have any fish right now in your house? Do you have an aquarium with fish, or
No, for many years after that, I did keep fish. I always kind of enjoyed having something quite attractive to look at, an aquarium. Yeah. But no, I haven't had them. Yeah, for a long time, 25 years or so. No.
All right, so that the passion didn't grow like whiskey. So all right.
I mean, I still like them, sure, but no, I don't have it. And you have to divide your time up carefully, right? And I probably don't have the time for much else right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That was our first job.
Question 3: what is the best sandwich?
Okay, there's very local things.
All right.
So I didn't realize they were going to get some of these questions, but they're good. Okay, there's some very local things. The best sandwich here is we have a roll, and it's just basically like a bun shape for the people who don't know what a roll is, but it's very Scottish. It's some people call it Morton's roll or Lawson's roll, or whatever the company is that you're used to eating. They have a very short shelf life, so you can't keep them beyond about, if you buy them in the morning, you need to eat them by the evening. Yeah. But you have that with square sausage, and it's a sausage the sausage meat is made in a big block, and then it's sliced and it's cooked in a square shape. It goes on this roll, sometimes with a potato scone, sometimes with a fried egg, sometimes just on its own with some brown sauce or ketchup, and that's the best sandwich on the planet. And I've tasted some lovely sandwiches all over the world, and they're all delicious. But I think all of us have a sandwich that takes us home.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a Glasgow roll and sausage.
Are you a Marvel movie fan in general, or is this just a one-off? All right. Well, this isn't part of the questions, but what is your favorite of the MCU movies? Do you have a favorite one that really stands out to you?
I have to say Endgame, because there's no way that they could pull that off. I thought there's just no way.
Yeah.
Too much happening, too much to resolve, too many characters, too many story arcs. It's just going to be a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And you go along and you watch this perfectly, in my view, orchestrated, wonderful piece of cinema, just thinking, okay, if I could go back and tell my 7-year-old self that this is what I've got to enjoy in the future, it would be an excited wee boy I'd be speaking to, right?
Yeah.
So I thought Endgame was great. And also things like Civil War, and what was the one before Endgame? It was
Infinity War.
Infinity War, yes.
Yeah.
I found that to be really bittersweet, right? Because what happens at the end.
Yeah.
So I found those, despite those movies being superhero movies, they have an ability to really draw you in emotionally, way more than you would expect.
Oh yeah.
Brilliantly done. Just I loved them, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wasn't a Marvel film until Endgame came out, and I was blown away by the complexity and the intricate writing throughout the whole, like how they were able to do that through a decade and a half of films. It truly is incredible. And then that climax at the end, it is so well done. I have to definitely agree with you on that. Yeah, and all the fan service wasn't laid on thick. It was just nicely sprinkled with jokes, and it worked on all the levels that you needed to work on to be able to take your kids and still enjoy it as an adult. Yeah, just brilliantly well done. Yep. What is your favorite action film of all time? And it might be one of the ones you just mentioned. Action. I'm going to get annoyed because I feel like I should be able to just pick one out. There's a lot of good ones. Let's say, if I was to start teasing you then with one that people say is a Christmas movie, but it is not a Christmas movie. We know what's that. We're going to that one, Die Hard. Right? Yeah, just because when it came out, the humor in it, it was the first villain that I actually had empathy for. Or it's not that I had empathy for him. It was just, he was just a brilliant villain, right? The original Die Hard. And before it was kind of over-egged and got really more and more extremely ridiculous each time. That to be a one-off movie was just so many quotable lines in it. The first Die Hard movie, and even you can watch that now 30 years later. I think it still stands up. So. Yeah, if not even better, especially in hindsight, because that was Alan Rickman, one of his first films, if not his first one, and he's the portrayal of the villain is so perfect. And now just knowing what kind of a legend he was in his early passing, you just look back on it even probably higher than you would when you first originally watched it. It is a classic that can stand the test of time without a doubt. Yeah, but I mean, it's tough to answer that question without knowing, and it's nice that you've not given me any of the questions in advance. It's much better, but I think if I was to have a chance to think about it, it'd be interesting. I'd probably end up with a list and not be able to pick a favourite, so it's good that I've just been able to pull one out that I particularly love. Any final thoughts on the Teaninich? Any last words before we jump to the next whiskey? Well, for me, this is less lemony, less fresh and bright than I remember. Yeah. The higher ABV is helping a lot of the texture on this, though. It's incredibly oily, and I would even go as far as say this has been quite buttery and sweet tonight. I remember why I went back and bought more of this, because it was very inexpensive too. I think it was only about £40, 35 maybe, but for a 10-year-old cask strength whiskey. And it's just a wonderful, pour a single glass, take it to the couch, and you're there for the rest of the night with it. Yeah. And lovely and buttery. Anybody that wants to explore
Teaninich. You can get it in lots of casks. I've just recently been gifted a very, very sherry-rich Teaninich, actually. It's here. So this is the exact same distillate, right? You look at this is in Adelphi. This is from a friend Doc, 58.8%. But you're going to more typically find it in a refill, a hoggy, a bourbon cask, something like that. And it's going to bring just a lovely Highland style.
Yeah.
And it's going to be inexpensive because it's that distillery that nobody knows, right? It's Teaninich.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
go back down and see if this lower ABV Kilkerran at 16 years old is able to keep up with it on the back of that cask strength Teaninich we've just tried.
Yeah.
So we've both got the same Kilkerran, haven't we, from last year?
Yeah. Right here. And that's, I believe, 75% ex-bourbon, 25% ex-sherry cask, if I remember the ratio correctly.
I'll trust you on that. Sounds a bit right to me. I think the first year they had a little bit of, it wasn't Madeira, was it Marsala cask? They had something in the mix in the 2020 release.
I think it was Marsala, like 10% Marsala. I think that's right.
Right, okay. But this one, 75-25, sounds right. Honestly speaking, my favourite of the two was the 2020, just because of how it was slightly more white stone fruit. It's going to be interesting as I put my nose in this, of course. White stone fruit, and there was a nice mineralic content to it. So there was a really lovely, clean, fresh coastal complexity to it. That this still has a wee bit, but it's styled. This is much fruitier and rounder, I think.
Yeah, I do have a bottle of the 2020 as well, but I haven't opened it yet, so I haven't done the back-to-back comparison yet.
It's going to be interesting to do. That's a nice coin that you have there, Tim.
Oh yeah, this was actually a generous gift by you, sending it my way. So I appreciate the Aqvavitae coin, and I always use a coin when I drink whiskey now. It's just a habit of mine.
Yeah, excellent. And that coin is a very special coin as well, so it's nice that you have it. I appreciate your support, buddy. Thank you.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, the nose on this I absolutely love. In some regards, I kind of view this, and to my young palate, as a slightly lighter version of like a Longrow 18. That's kind of how not quite as peated, but just a little bit more subtle and nuanced.
I think that's a perfect way to describe this. I mean, somebody who's looking for a Longrow 18 experience might not find it in this, but it makes perfect sense what you're saying. Yeah. And I think what's really interesting, we've just gone on up from the back of a really fresh, clean Teaninich experience, and it brings out some of the sourness on this. This is it's probably one of the cleaner Campbelltown expressions. But on the back of that Teaninich, it still comes out quite sour, maybe even a little bit umami, savoury. It's still buttery, but in a completely different way. Yeah. The salt is there. The idea of it being for me, it's not peat forward. Would I pick out peat on this? It would be, depending on what I sit alongside. Maybe I could pick up the smoke or the peat, but that often escapes me sometimes. But it's just as I took that first sip from it, I just remember, it reminds me how much I love this whiskey. Yeah. And to be fair to them, this is why nobody can get it. This isn't a branding exercise. They haven't designed in aspiration and luxury good placement here. It's not a fake aspiration and controlled exclusivity. None of that is at play here. They've tried to make as good a whiskey as they can at the right price point. The world's talking about it. There are even some idiots on YouTube talking about this stuff, right? Yeah. Every Thursday night. Yeah. And it means that the world's listening. The world's listening to what Springbank have got to say, what Glengyle have got to say, and their success is deserved. I know it's really hard for us as diehard fans because we can't get it now, whereas we used to be able to buy it easily. Yeah. But that's it's the way of it. It's what happens when things are successful, unfortunately. It's capitalism. It's everything.
Yeah.
We can't grudge the success.
No, not at all.
In the distillery.
Yeah, I mean, and the two different markets, obviously, in the United States, all Campbelltown products are substantially more expensive at MSRP. Like the 16-year-old is about $150 in store, whereas, in the UK, it's a significantly better value than that. I got my bottle from the UK, so I can't complain. I unfortunately stole a bottle from all the UK folks, but so my value is still very high on this. But to me, this is maybe I've had the Kilkerran 8-year-old sherry casks, which I love, but I think I like this one a little bit better just because of the nuances and the subtlety, and it's a simpler dram in a lot of regards, but it just hits all the right notes for me. It's such a good whiskey.
It really, really is. I think if you were to talk this whiskey up and give it to someone that was early on in their journey, they might find it just a bit. It's one of those whiskies that would pay back somebody who's really looking to spend time with it and invest in it. Yeah. There is lots to unlock here. It's very elegant at the same time as being quite Campbelltowny and funky.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably Campbelltown's most elegant whiskey, actually.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Kilkerran 16, and I mean, but it still has those bizarre elements that seem to come out of the peninsula down there, right? It's got the sourness, the oiliness, the industrial, however it is you describe that thing that people like to call funk.
Yeah,
it still has it. It's a good pick, Tim. I don't remember if it was your pick or my pick, but
it was. I sent you the list of all my open bottles, and you picked the 3, so you get all the credit for tonight. And I'm glad you picked.
Okay. Let's raise a glass to that.
Yes. Cheers. What was the first bottle you bought to start your whiskey journey?
Glengoyne 10.
All right.
A Glengoyne 10. I don't know if you know the Luca story.
No. I feel like I've heard it on one of your platforms, but just for anybody who hasn't heard it, let's hear the little backstory.
In 2005, the company I told you that I was working for, they sent over their guy from Rome. There was a conference here, and I was looking after him for a few days. And I picked him up at the airport, and he was excited to be in Scotland. And he said, "Roy, I'm here for a few days. I love whiskey. I love malt whiskey. Before I return back to Italy, we have to visit a distillery." I said, "Look, I'm really sorry." I said, "You've probably asked the worst person in the country, because I don't like whiskey. I don't know anything about it. I wouldn't know where to start." And he looked at me and said, "You live in the country that makes the finest spirit in the world, and you choose to know nothing about it." That was his reaction. And I was like, oh. So I came home. 2005 was the start of Google, and I Googled distilleries near to me, whatever.
Yep.
And I found a place that could take tours. And I went back and I said, "Look, okay, it's sorted out. Before you take your flight home on Wednesday, we'll go and visit a local distillery to us." "Ah, good. Which distillery?" he said. I said, "Oh, it's just a tiny distillery near to Glasgow. It's called Glengoyne." And he said, "Glengoyne? My favourite. Thank you so much." So not only did he already have a passion in something I was completely disconnected, and despite living next to it, he knew about Glengoyne, and he knew the whiskies very well. He had the whiskies at home. He was happy. I took him to that tour. He was like a kid, this alpha male Italian, right? He was like a kid in a sweet shop going around Glengoyne, asking all of these really insightful questions that showed me that he knows. And I'm thinking, there's a guy with his food and his wine and all the kind of, Mediterranean lifestyle that he's living there, and he's impassioned by whiskey, the stuff that we make here, this brown drink. There must be something in this.
Yeah.
So I had a sip. I was driving that day. I only had a sip, but it was enough to make me realize this is nothing like I've ever experienced before. And I left the tasting room straight through the shop, water jug, Glencairn glass, 10-year-old bottle, probably a T-shirt. I don't even remember, the whole thing. And I brought the bottle back, and my wife looked at me and she said, "What, whiskey? What, whiskey?" And now look behind me here, right? It's just
yeah. Little did she know what has just started.
But Luca, every time I speak to Luca, or every time we meet up again, he's still working for the company, and and he'll just kind of look at me with a kind of wry smile and say, "Yeah, well, you know, look what I created," you know.
Exactly.
And he's quite right. So Glengoyne 10, there you go.
What is your favorite distillery?
It's funny how that changes over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it really is. I know that people talk about it's like picking a favorite child. You know, if I still probably have to go up to, as it stands today, and it's been taken away from us perhaps a wee bit, but it's probably still Clynelish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love the Campbelltown distilleries. I love so many of the Islay distilleries. There's lots all over the Highlands and to Speyside. There's just so many that I really enjoy a lot. But yeah, I would have to say, if I was just to pick one,
yeah,
Clynelish.
Yeah.
And there have been so many bottles of Clynelish over the years that have just been able to just whisk me away.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and even their standard 14-year-old, every time I go to it, it's like, man, this is better than the average core bottling of any distillery. This is such a phenomenal whiskey. And then you go to those indie bottlings that can really blow you away. It's really is fantastic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Clynelish, especially Clynelish from the 90s, it's difficult for us to afford now.
Yeah.
Already, but it's like that for a reason. People know about it, so it is what it is. It's the same reason we can't enjoy the Kilkerrans and Springbanks anymore. Once word gets out, you know, these things tend to they're not infinite, so they're going to get snapped up and they will disappear. And it's whiskey, so it's not like people are putting it on a shelf and dusting it off all the time. I mean, I know that people do that, but generally it's an ever diminishing thing because there are bottles constantly being opened and consumed. So and I think that's the right thing. If somebody's gone to all that effort of putting it in the bottle, the best thing to do is for somebody one day to unlock it and feed back to them how much they're loving it, right? There's nothing.
Absolutely. And especially if you're opening it and sharing it with the right group of people. I mean, that's what whiskey's meant for. That's to be consumed with your friends and family. All right. What is the best cask type for Scotch maturation to you? What's your favorite cask maturation?
Refill, ex-bourbon barrel or hoggy. And the reason for that is that, you know, we have to play to our... The climate in Scotland means that we are not going to enjoy the rapid maturation that they do in the tropics or that they do in Texas or these places. It's going to be a different thing. So what's happened over the years, what's become really good for Scotch whisky is a longer maturation in a really cool, damp climate. It's just the way that it is. So it's really nice to have lots of whiskies that we can enjoy that's super cask active. You know, whether it's really a super active sherry, a PX cask, or a wine cask, and whatever it may be, these are wonderful first fill bourbon. But if you leave something into the teenage years, you know, in a quiet space, a decent cask, refill, because remember, refill, what we're actually saying there is that we're not saying this is refill, because refill's quite negative, but it is refill.
Yeah.
What we're actually saying is that it's an ex-Scotch whisky cask. So when you think about it, the previous incumbent was Scotch. That's quite, that should be a positive thing.
Yeah.
You know, depending on how you look at it. And I know that the wood gets more and more tired the more it's used, of course. But something where the wood is not so active and not so dominant, that over those 12, 15, 17, 18 years, the whiskey is going to be able to interact with it in order for it to work in a nice way. And the environment gets a voice as well. Whether that's a centralised warehouse somewhere, I don't know, or somewhere in a dunnage warehouse, somewhere close to the sea, all these romantic ideas of maturation facilities. But for me, that tends to be, I would hate to only have that to drink. I love to contrast it. I love to drink them all and enjoy them all. But that would be my choice. If it could just be one, just keep giving us the refills, please. Yeah,
and you know, when you get a whiskey that hits those notes just right from the refill cask, it is. I mean, it's hard to beat. I have a signatory cask strength Del Ewan 23-year-old that is just so creamy, and with the tropical fruits and everything about it is just so well integrated. It's hard to beat something that is just that well made.
Yeah, it's interesting that, you know, when you see people talking about first fill barrels or first fill ex bourbon or whatever, they tend to be much more, if they talk about the fruit, they tend to be much more citric. Or they can sometimes get a little bit tropical when they talk about banana or coconut maybe.
Yeah.
But when it's a refill cask for a longer duration, you tend to find people start to talk about these really like creamy peach and pineapple and mango and all of these kind of really aromatic, slightly more aromatic tropical fruits. Yeah. And that, when we recognize that, it's so Moorish, compelling, addictive, right? It's that's the sweet spot for me. But all whiskies don't have to be that. That's just, again, a bit like having to force myself to pick Clynelish. Yeah. So you know what my favourite combination is going to be, right?
Yeah, definitely. But like you said, luckily we don't have to pick just one, because that's the beauty of Scotch whiskey, is that the diversity of the flavor profiles makes it interesting and makes you want to keep on exploring.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so how many bottles do you have in your collection, if you know? And if you want to disclose it.
Yeah. I need to contextualize it. So when I started the channel, I had a little over 120 bottles. And they were constantly being rotated. So if you're kind of buffering between 80 to 120, you're getting through them much quicker. There's less variation there. Whereas now the spread is so much wider than that the levels drop slowly. Yeah, especially over the lockdown. Obviously, there haven't been people coming to the house. I haven't been sharing the whiskey nearly as much as I normally would. And I did do a bottle count yesterday, so I will give you an exclusive. And if I'm judged by this, I'm judged. That bottle count was 474, and I've added probably at least a dozen or more to that since that bottle count. I would say that sealed bottles, I probably have maybe 40, I guess. Yeah. I did note that, but I don't remember. So, you know, it's probably 90% of those are open.
Yeah, and you know, I think you know, part of what I mentioned earlier, the more you have open, you know, the longer it takes to finish them off, and the bigger your collections are naturally going to grow. And now that this is actually your daily living, that's the expectation, is that you do this as part of your job, but also part of your passion. One bottle of whiskey to drink for the rest of your life, which bottle are you picking? That's a tough question.
Oh my goodness, that's really tough. I suppose it doesn't need to be something that's common and easily available. You're just asking me to have one whiskey, one whiskey only. Yeah. To drink for the rest of my life. But you know how hard that is, right?
That's very hard.
Yeah. Because you would be sipping it and thinking, oh, I wish it was peatier. Yeah. Oh, I wish it had more sherry cask. Oh, I wish. I would have to go with Signatory Vintage, Cask Strength, Cask number 8687, Clynelish, 1995.
All right.
The whiskey that, it was a Whiskey Rev, my friend bought it. He found it online and we bought it and brought it round to the house, and we opened it that night, and there were 3 of us in the house that night. And while 2 of them were chatting, I was online buying a bottle, literally after one sip. And it's because that's a time that we were exploring flavours, and we were starting to feel more comfortable about articulating what we were tasting in the whiskey. We didn't feel silly about talking about what fruit or what floral element or what it was tasting like. We're becoming more comfortable with that. And texture for me was this thing, and it was Clynelish that really taught me to look at texture in a much more serious way. So we were doing all of that, and in that bottle specifically, all of it came together like a bright flash of delicious light. And I just thought, and in fact, between the Whiskey Rev and that individual cask, we must have bought another 8 bottles. Just anytime we ever saw it, anytime we were in an independent shop, we think that they might have it on the shelf. We were asking them to check their stocks and things and grabbing it. But the last one I bought was £200, and the first one I bought was £89.
Yeah.
And now, if you found that bottle, it would be double again, maybe 350, 400, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. I've had my time with it. It doesn't owe me anything. But if you're asking me to have one bottle, then I'd have to pick something like that. Yeah.
And do you have any left in your collection, or is it all gone?
I may have one bottle left for a very special occasion.
Right. All right, let's jump into the third whiskey for tonight, the Redbreast cask strength 12-year-old batch B120, bottled at let's see, 57.6%. A combination of ex-sherry and ex-bourbon cask. Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength in the United States. If you order it from California, let's say, you can get this for around $65 to $70, which is extremely good value for this 12-year-old. It's significantly better than the blue spot value, and it's the experience is equally as good, in my opinion, to the blue spot. This one I love. What about you? What's your take on the Redbreast?
I would agree that the blue spot's a nice thing as a change, a step change, a contrast. But if you were to measure the thing,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is where the value is. We pay between 75 and 90 for this in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
There are some retailers that have it a wee bit less from time to time. I've just recently heard, but I paid I think 85 for this when I first bought it. So you're getting it significantly cheaper than we are.
Yeah.
It struggles at the price I pay or we pay
Mm-hmm.
in the UK. It's probably trading at the top end of what it can ask,
Mm-hmm.
but it's undeniably good.
Yeah.
At the price you're paying for it, it's incredible.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, without a doubt. And yet, like I said, this was my gateway into Irish whiskey, and it really kind of opened my eyes to how good a pot still whiskey can be. I mean, it really, like, just tasting it now, and this is the best the batch B120 has been to me so far since I've opened it. And just that pot still, like, it's hard for me to describe what exactly it is, but that freshness, maybe like that creamy peachiness maybe, but that specific pot still unmalted barley flavor profile that is included in this really kind of just sets it apart in terms of the experience.
Yeah, I often wonder if it is the unmalted barley that's bringing that texture, that oiliness.
Mm-hmm.
The body, creamy, oily. For me, yeah, it is a little peachy, but for me, this one tonight tastes a wee bit closer to, like, I don't know if you ever enjoy tinned mandarins, or the little tinned where the mandarin pieces come to you in segments and syrup.
Yeah.
It's kind of a wee bit more like that, but it's lovely, beautifully sweet. You mentioned what the ABV was on this, so isn't it incredible as we sip this to realise that we are having a 57.6% ABV whiskey?
Yeah, it does not drink that hot.
No, not at all. Incredible.
Yeah. So if you're not drinking whiskey neat, what's your next choice for an alcoholic beverage?
Beer, unfiltered beer. I like IPAs. I like North American IPAs, New England IPAs. I also enjoy whiskey that's not neat. I enjoy a whiskey highball. It's probably the best.
Yeah.
It's just fresh and light. Summertime, if we do take it's been a long time since we've had a summer holiday because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But if we're away in a warmer climate, a whiskey highball, and I don't mind what whiskey it is. I like to try different whiskies, but often if we're in Spain, for example, it's going to be most likely to be Johnny Red, Johnny Black, or Jameson. More likely Jameson, actually. Ballantines.
Yeah.
And it's just poured over ice. Some places I'll add a little syrup or treat it in a slightly different way. But mostly just topped off with soda water, slice of citrus or something in it, and that's just. It's wonderful because you still get that whiskey flavour.
Yeah.
But you get this lovely kind of refreshing drink.
Mm-hmm.
And the strength is always in check, so you can kind of just drink it and never feel like you're suffering from it, or it's, I don't know, it's just something that I really enjoy. So yeah. A good quality craft beer, a tasty craft beer, or a highball. And other than that, I would have tea. Or water.
One song to listen to for the rest of your life. What song are you picking?
Oh my goodness, these are tough.
These are not easy questions.
Some of the songs that are kind of most memorable to me can often be very maudlin songs. You know, they're kind of sentimental and.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think if you were only to pick one for the rest of your life, it's got to be something that's kind of almost can be lots of things for lots of different situations. So let's go with. There's a Manchester band called James that were very popular in the 1990s. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
No.
So there's the track "Sit Down."
Sit Down.
It was a bit of an anthem in the 90s, I think. And you know the lyrics are quite. You know, I think it's about inclusivity and togetherness and kind of looking out for people that are not always included. Some people that are not lucky or fortunate. Some people that are just kind of going through life with the best intentions, but they also need somebody to kind of reach in and help them. It's not easy to get out of certain situations in your life without a bit of inspiration, at the very least. All the better if you've got a coach or somebody that can reach in. And I've been fortunate to have a few of those in my life, and you'll always look back on your life and think that without those relationships, friendships, meetings, would I have been here? Would I have managed to get here? And I think that's why that song in particular resonates me. And if it wasn't that, it would probably be something from the 50s, something sung by Dean Martin. Yeah.
All right, so we're on to your final question before you are known to the Instagram audience. If you could share a dram of whiskey with 4 famous people, dead or alive, which 4 people are you choosing?
Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., and you did say 4 people, right?
4 people, yep.
Michael Jackson, as in whiskey Michael Jackson, the whiskey writer.
All right.
So I would have this oddball discussion going on here, right? Where I'd be speaking to this guy that's been into whiskey all his life and talking to him about the whiskey thing, and then just kind of trying to get some sense of what it would have been like to be alive in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the Vegas scene and all of that kind of thing. That's long been an easy answer of me. The Dean Martin thing, especially. I don't know if it's true that how much he loved his relationship with alcohol, or whether that was just kind of something that was made up.
Yeah.
But I know that he was more into drinking clear spirits and things. For Sinatra was famously a Jack Daniel's drinker, I think. But I think it would be nice just to kind of sit here with Dean Martin and say, let me take you through the 5 regions of Scotland, Dean. What do you think of these? You know?
Yeah. So you're a fan. You're a fan of the Rat Pack and the 50s era.
Yeah, fairly passive, but I annoy my family constantly with singing. But I think they're okay with it because they know that I'm not grumpy. Then I'm in a good mood if I'm singing, right? And I sing in the shower, and it's kind of the things that tend to pop into my head that I sing is going to be old school. It's a nostalgic thing. I think there's a thing of comfort there for me, so probably that's what it is. But yeah, I do enjoy it. I love it. Yeah.
So have you ever done a whiskey mic night where you drink a little whiskey, you sing a few songs in front of a group? Is that something on the docket in the future for you?
I cannot imagine me doing it on the channel. It's not going to be a V-pub. I mean, it's a karaoke V-pub. Wow, I wonder if we could make that work, right? It would probably be the single most cringiest thing that had ever happened on YouTube. But my wife and I, again, when the kids were very small or before the kids came along, we would have karaoke nights and things. But you're not really singing at that point. You're just you've had a few drinks and things like that. There's not. But yeah, I mean, Scotland, I think we're a nation of singers. I think people like to sing, but it's usually revolving around maudlin songs. You know, when we've had a wee dram or two. Ireland as well, obviously famous for singing and things. So yeah, I wish that people sang more. Honestly, I wish people were comfortable to just kind of sing more.
Yeah.
The Italian culture that Dean and Frank and things were from, it was really considered cool if they were young men with a good voice. The Italian culture really kind of supported and celebrated that. And I think that's quite a rare thing. It would be nice if that was more celebrated and it was okay, much in the way it is in rural Scotland and the Highlands or Ireland or whatever, where you go into these bars and things and there's always somebody at the end of the bar that's willing to, you buy them a drink and they'll sing a song. That kind of idea. I wish there was a lot more of that around. It's wonderful.
I want to thank you for joining me tonight. It's I guess it's 8:30 your time. I'm sure you've got things to do this evening, so I'll let you go from here. So I appreciate you taking the time and joining me tonight.
Tim, I appreciate you inviting me, buddy. Thank you so much.